Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why I value and use microplates. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And yes, I have a pair of microplates right here. Yes, they're Keno body ones. Yes, I know I bought. They were $5 cheaper than comparable ones on Amazon. So that's what I got. All right, don't hate on me for that. So microplates. Now, this whole topic comes up and people will say, well, microplates are completely useless unless you have calibrated plates. Well, it's like if you've got a home gym, and a whole lot of us do, I'm real big on home gyms, and you don't have at least a few calibrated plates, I really don't know what you're doing with your life. They're not that expensive, right? They're not that expensive. And if those of you who are going to really invest in your training and your future, and particularly if you're training as a couple, because microplates are extremely valuable for women, right? Even more so than for men, even for all their exercises. For men, we tend to mostly use these for, for upper body exercises because we're going to make 5-pound jumps usually on squats and deadlifts and things, but not always. They're way more valuable for women. And I mean, if you're at the point to where you're married or you have a long-term girlfriend or anything and she lives with you and you don't have a home gym, you're throwing away money on a gym at that point anyways. I don't know why you have multiple gym memberships. It's just at that point it'd be a good investment to drop a couple $1,000s on a home gym. Be a real good idea. It's not like there's anything you actually need at a gym that you can't fit in a one car space in a garage or half of a bedroom. Machines are kind of a waste of time anyway, so who cares? But even if you're going to a gym, microplates, they fit in your bag. So we get into this topic of, well, why? These are how you break through plateaus as an intermediate and advanced lifter. We could argue novices only maybe need these for small exercises, like even the press, maybe some curls or whatever, that's fine. And women might need them for everything. Come in real handy. In fact, women won't even sub 1-pound plates. They're really, really valuable when it comes to stuff like their upper body stuff, and then these microplates for their lower. But even for you guys, I mean, they become really valuable in things like the press or exercises like that. Now, the other thing we get to, though, is that more advanced lifters, these microplates allow you to make small jumps because sometimes that's what you have to do. Let's say you're trying to get 3x5 on a given weight, and it's relatively easy, but you can't make a full 5-pound jump and maintain the reps. The microplates come in handy. These little bitty small loadings. Now, a lot of people would say, well, again, you need calibrated plates for that to matter because the plates themselves could be off that much. In other words, if you're doing 315 and you're not using calibrated plates to where you're within a few grams, those plates could all be off a pound. Well, that's true, but if you're using your own home gym, most of you don't have more plates than what you actually deadlift. So you're using the same plates every time anyways, right? If you're using the same plates at home, this becomes a moot point because your 315 that actually is 317 or 313 is consistently that every single time because you're probably using the same plates. Odds are you're using the same plates. Now, if you're at a gym that uses all these others and every single plate is off by a pound or two, people would say, well, we're still running into the same issue. Not really, because people tend to use the same brand of plates when they do stuff. In other words, we're creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit. And so if we use that specific type of plate when we're at the gym, we'll tend to grab that same type every time. And plates tend to be consistently light or consistently heavy. Usually lighter tend to be in that direction for everything in that line. You don't tend to get from the same company, even in a commercial gym, or the exact same plate style. You don't usually get out of a batch of them a 45 that's actually 47 and another one that's 43. You don't usually see that. We tend to be fairly consistent, and those deviations, even if you're using mixed plates, the more plates you add, the smaller the chance becomes that you're going to be off by a substantial amount. Because of that plus or minus variation, you end up with a bell curve. So by the time you're getting to a 5 plate on each side deadlift or whatever lift you're doing, that variation of a pound and a half plus or minus on each one starts to balance out more and more the more plates you add, even if every single plate is off by at least a half pound, right? It starts to balance out. So your variation gets lower and lower the more plates you add. So the more advanced you get in general, the less variation you're getting. But what you also need to think about is upward trends, because you know what? Your strength varies from day to day anyways. We're just in that ballpark of, yeah, okay, that seems like it's our 5 rep max, but how close were we to getting an actual 6 rep max? That could vary a lot from day to day. I mean, your strength is going to vary a little day to day. A lot of these exercises involve moving our body as part of it, right? Right? Well, that fluctuates more than a couple pounds a day. So what you're looking at is a general upward trend. So let's say that your weights are off by up to 5 pounds every single day. So let's say you're working with 225 on an exercise, and that's kind of where you're stalled and you start trying to micro load a little bit. Well, you're like, yeah, but my variation is 220 to 230 on a wave, right? Depending on what plates I grab that day, because I'm at a gym and the plates are inconsistent because I'm not using calibrated plates. So I've got this variation, right? So you already have built-in wave loading a little bit into your training. So you already have an undulation. And you have no way to control that because you don't have time. And trust me, you don't want to go running around trying to measure every single plate at the gym. It's such a pain in the ass. It would be a waste of your time. It's just silly. So you're dealing with an inherent undulation, but what's your control? The microplates. So we don't ever not mark stuff just because we're dealing with inconsistent plates, do we? We mark 2 plates aside as 225 no matter what those plates actually weighed that they were advertised at 45. So we already have 225 written there with a plus or minus whatever the variation is for that plate manufacturer. You know, you're plus or minus 5 pounds. So it technically would be 225 plus or minus 5 because you're not using calibrated plates. When you throw the microplates on, and you know, no one has a problem with that. They still count it as 10 reps. They still count it as 5 reps, don't they? With 225. And it works just fine in spite of the minor variations. This simply gives you a smaller means of control. You know, it's like when people are more novice, no one ever complains when they add 5 pounds that they actually call it 5 pounds. No one ever says, well, that 5 pounds doesn't matter because you're not using calibrated plates. That 10 pounds doesn't matter because you're not using calibrated plates. No, we all understand it's an upward trend. It's the same thing if you add 1.25 pounds on each side. So you've added 2.5 pounds, but you know these are probably close to accurate. These aren't going to be off by much. They're not going to add variation. So what you are doing is, in spite of it being a kind of a bell curve, and keep in mind, the bell curve, the more plates you add, the more consistent it becomes, even with varied plates. The less likely you are to be at the extremes because you have all those coin flips. It's like the only chances of being off by a lot would be the chances of, if you've got 10 plates, of flipping a coin 10 times and coming up heads, that you would all get heavier light compared to normal on there. So it averages out pretty well. So you're still at this point, when you add the 2.5 pound plates, you're now 227 plus or minus 5. You're ensuring an upward trend. It's still progressive overload. It still gives you a means of control. And it still gives you a means of making smaller jumps inside of that bell curve and the wave loading that's occurring, doesn't it? Right? It still gives you a means of controlling the progressive overload. And so even if someone were to drop down to 1/2 pound plates to make micro jumps going upward, even with non-calibrated plates, I would still recommend that. It's still a good idea because it gives you an ensured general upward trend. Because again, this whole concept that people have in their heads, they're not realizing that your strength varies from day to day, even on a perfect program, no matter what. And sometimes the only reason you missed a lift that you normally got, which is why we have to look at those terms, is because your strength was at one of its weakest that day with the weight you normally lift. Your strength might have been down 1%, 2% that day, and you happen to have gotten 5 pounds total heavier weight based on the plates. Right? It's not that you were weaker that day, way more weaker. It's just that you had a bad luck of the two meshing together. Because had you gotten 5 pounds lighter, and instead of 230, you had 220 because you got the plates that were lighter that day, you would have gotten the lifts and not even realized that your strength was down. So I think people overthink this stuff without realizing that microplates do give you some control in the variable weight that you're doing. And if you're doing like I am, though, and you have calibrated plates for all this stuff, then it gives you an absolute control, doesn't it? It gives you an absolute control. So either way you look at it, microplates are a real good idea, particularly for female lifters, particularly for anyone who's finished the novice phase. They become very valuable, and I think that most of you should invest in some. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.